everyone. I'm Barbara Hamlee. The world watched in horror on October 7th when Hamas fighters stormed through border fences and killed hundreds of Israelis in their homes, on the streets, and at a music festival, and took others as hostages, including Americans. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared war, and to date, more than 2,000 Israelis and Palestinians have been killed. Up next on Another View, the history behind the fight between Israel and Hamas, what's next to come, and why all of us need to pay attention. The Another View Roundtable is next, right after this regional, national, and local news from NPR and WHRO News.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Hamlee. A few community announcements before we get to our roundtable discussion on the war in the Middle East, among other topics that we're going to discuss today. So, if you live in Chesapeake, Hampton Roads Transit wants to hear from you. They're holding 3 public meetings, wanting to know what you think about high-capacity transit options to enhance your regional transportation network. So you can go to a public meeting at Hyatt Place in Chesapeake Greenbrier on Tuesday the 17th of this month from 5 to 7 p.m. Or you can go to a pop-up event at Robert Hall Transfer Center. That's on Wednesday, October the 18th from 2 to 4 p.m., and that's at Robert Hall and Military Highway. Or there's a third public meeting in South Norfolk Memorial Library, and that's Thursday, October the 19th from 4 to 6 p.m. Now, I know that's a lot of information, so if you are interested, want to figure out how you can make your voice heard, go to connectingchesapeake.com, connectingchesapeake.com, and you'll find the information there. Those of you in Gloucester, the Gloucester branch of the NAACP is holding its Gloucester High School W.E.B. Du Bois Honor Society College Career and Resource Fair. It is on October the 19th at Gloucester High School. That's on Short Lane in Gloucester. They're going to have 40-plus colleges, technical schools, military, fire and rescue, and more. It is open to all neighboring school districts and communities, and you can contact the NAACP at gloucesternAACP@gmail.com, or you can call the Gloucester High School Counseling Office. That's at 804-693-7688. So if you've got a student about to go off to college or to start their career outside of high school and you're living up in the Gloucester area, you might want to check that out. And then finally, I hope you will join me and others next Thursday, October the 19th at 7 p.m. at the Addicts Theater for our discussion called Race and Money, how you can make an impact. And this is about philanthropy and how money is used in conjunction with race and how we can make it better. So I have the privilege of serving as the MC, and I will be having a one-on-one conversation with a gentleman by the name of Edgar Villanueva. He wrote the book Decolonizing Wealth, and I'm telling you, if you have not read this book, it is an eye-opener, especially if you're in the philanthropic space. So come on out to the Addicts. It is free and open to everyone, but we would like you to register. Race and Money, hrcf.eventbrite.com. And you need registration by October the 16th. Race and Money, crf.eventbrite.com. That is next Thursday. And then following that, we will be having some community conversations. I'll talk to you about those next week. So there we go. Let's meet our roundtable because we have a lot to talk about today. Dawn Hester is the treasurer of the City of Norfolk. Hey, Dawn.
Hey, hi, everybody.
How are you? Galen Canoyton is a political advisor and president of the Hampton NAACP. NAACP all over the place today.
All over the place. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone.
And Dr. Eric Claville is a political and legal analyst and a friend of Another View, been here with the Claville Report for many, many years. How are you, sir?
Many years. It's great to be here with you, Barbara.
It is great to be here, too.
Absolutely.
So, Eric, I'm going to start with you because on this very show, you predicted a couple years ago about the Third World War and what is happening with Israel and Hamas. Is this part of the puzzle? You were talking about different pieces of things that were happening globally that would indicate that we could be headed that way.
Yeah. So Barbara, to answer your question, yes, I think this is part of that puzzle. I think is the second piece to that. But before I address any of that, I'd just like to, again, give my thoughts and prayers and condolences to everyone that's lost their life, to all the hostages that are taken on both sides of this terrible conflict. So we wish the best for all of them, and also a peaceful resolution of what we're seeing today. But as it relates to what's happening now in the Middle East, like I said, a couple of years ago, I just kind of looking at the world dynamics, and I believe that was where I addressed the U.S. as a lone superpower and the challenges that we were facing in that. So with that, we knew that China was starting to challenge us as a superpower, both militarily, economically, and also geographically, with obtaining and occupying spaces across the country. Well, actually across the world. And also here in our country with farmland and the like. Then I talked about Russia. Russia itself really ratcheting up and opportunity really reoccupying the Baltics, Latvia, Estonia, and the other Baltic nation. Part of that is that area is Ukraine. It's not Baltic, but it's a Baltic Ukraine area, of course, with Belarus in the middle of that. So we see now that Russia has started to try to take Ukraine back. And there's another little piece to that with what's happening with Vladimir Putin. We know that he's sick. We know he has cancer. Report just came out a couple of days ago that his death is imminent, that he is terminally ill, with cancer. That's the reason why we haven't seen him recently. But then also, in talking about what the other piece to that puzzle is the Middle East and what's happening there. A couple of months ago, actually, I think in April, Israel was looking to sign a normalization agreement with Saudi Arabia, which is huge, which would normalize trade agreement in the Middle East. It was called, quote unquote, taking down the wall of enmity between those nations, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Jordan, and United Emirates, right? So basically open up free trade for energy, cable optics, fibers, the whole nine. And then, of course, cyber. This war is going to take place in cyber. I think what's happening now in Israel with the attack of Hamas in Israel, which was during a very vulnerable moment, understand that Israel politically and socially was in uprising for really probably the last 5 years with under the current Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who of course under indictment several times, started to clear out the government, top leaders, and a lot of top military leaders. There's a major publication in Israel, Haaretz, that actually wrote a scathing indictment against him, blaming him for what has taken place, the weakening of the government itself.
And there were lots of protests in the street over his governance prior to what happened with Hamas.
Absolutely. So Israel itself was really unstable in that instance. But what has taken place there, now we know that Hamas killed over 1,200 people in a nighttime terrorist raid and actions against Israel, different parts of it. And then, of course, Israel has responded, and they're still responding, bombarding the Gaza Strip, which is a tiny piece of land between Egypt and also the nation of Israel, and bombarding them with missile after missile after missile. And they're wanting to do a ground invasion, going for hostages, also raids, and just basically decimating that area to strike fear back into them. Now, we know that there was an 11-day war that took place in May of 2021, I believe, around that time, which saw hundreds of people killed during that time period. But, that's happening now. I think that Israel has, when you start to see keep in mind this war is being told from two different lenses. It's being told from the victims in Israel and also the victims in the Palestinian area of Gaza.
Speak to that for just a moment, because the people, the Palestinians and Hamas, are two separate things.
They are.
In terms of the way that people respond to them.
Right.
Yeah.
So the Palestinians are the nation, the people that are there in that area of Palestine known as the Gaza Strip. Of course, it was known as that area under Egypt control, I think, until 1967, around that time period, until it was taken over control during the Arab-Israeli War when that happened. And then Israel occupied it. Keep in mind, Israel occupied that area with about 7,000 troops up until 2005. They just recently withdrew troops from that area. So it's an occupied area. But Hamas came out of the 1987 war that took place. So it was basically a militant group that rose out of that last war. So they are Palestinian, but it is a militant group. So that small group is the one that's doing the damage or did the damage in Israel and taking those hostages, which some of those we know are Americans and some that were killed. So it's not the entire group of people. However, that entire group of people are the ones that are suffering. So you're seeing children who are badly injured.
Are horrible.
Yeah, they're terrible. They're absolutely terrible. So when you start to look at this war through those lenses, you have to keep it in balance of what's taking place. But of course, each faction is going to tell the war from their viewpoint to support it. The major issue, though, is this is bad. But the major issue is Hezbollah, which is north of Israel in Lebanon. Which is, of course, northern Israel, which borders Syria, borders it on if we're looking at the map to its right or to the east. With that, Hezbollah is really well funded. Military is much more capable of doing a lot more damage. So you're looking
at
Hamas. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So Hamas, they were. They had, trucks and things that they ran into and did their damage. But Hezbollah, they have sophisticated weapons, right? And that's where you'll get issues. If Israel goes into Gaza, they risk Hezbollah attacking them from the north, which both those groups are funded by Iran. Now, I want to take us back just a little bit more. Keep in mind, there were 7 days early into President Trump's administration where we almost bombed Iran. We almost went in. And he pulled those planes were on the way to deliver those bombs in the capital of Iran. This was one of his good moments, and he called those planes back, but they were on their way to do damage. Iran is not the country that anybody wants to go to war with. It's a war that cannot be won. And if we do that, then we're looking at something that is horrendous on all fronts. Because if we go into Iran, China has already said that they will back Iran, and Russia said that they would back Iran. So now you get those three nations, two that I mentioned earlier, that will basically back any type of war against any type of war that Iran comes into. And of course, it's us, it's Israel, and Europe for the most part for what they can contribute. We know that they're they're without NATO, Israel really can't. Europe really can't defend itself against the encroachment of Russia. So, what does that do for us as the United States? That puts us in the middle of supporting financially and also militarily. All these fronts, but we still haven't addressed the cyber part. Keep in mind, under former President Trump's administration, all of our national defense agencies were hacked. People forget that.
That's
those
right.
non-agencies. So now we don't know what they got. And there's also discussion about what Israel did not know about Hamas and what they knew. And if they didn't know, what is it that we're missing that we don't know about our enemies as well? Are we vulnerable? And where are we vulnerable at? So when you look at all of this, I sit back and I say that get ready because these things are going to come to a head much sooner than we think.
So our other two pundits, let me bring you guys into the conversation because I know that there are probably people sitting out there right now, particularly some African Americans who may be saying, we don't have a nickel in this fight. Why are we talking about this? Why is this important that we stay abreast of what's going on? Dawn.
Because it's in our backyard right now, as far as I can see, just based on how government has been responding and how our citizens are responding, and how we are polarizing ourselves. It, to me, is creating some of the same dynamics, different, but some of the same dynamics. When we have a leader here who is trying to tell us what to do, tell us how to live, tell us that he has all the answers. That's somebody else who shall not be named. But so we have the same kind of facets just working right amongst us right now. And so to me, that's why we have to pay attention what is happening everywhere, because it's not...
we don't live in a vacuum.
It's not that way anymore. Everything is worldwide, and everything has implications for us. And that's why, when people complain about the economy, that's oil. That's over there. That's, so groups working with each other, countries working with each other, prices go up, prices go down. They get the low price, we get the high price. All of that is a part of how the world operates now. So everything that happens everywhere impacts us.
Mm-hmm. Gayleen?
More importantly, and financially, that's important. But do we want to end up like Gaza? Really? Partnerships with other countries and Israel is very important. This is strategic warfare we're talking about now. Mm-hmm. And so the strategic warfare part is protection. And so we have to be protected. So we have to be able to work with other countries that we have the same interests in terms of being able to move forward. So you got to think about it, about security and protection, not only of our finances, of our military and everything else that Eric had just said. Mm-hmm. So we can't live in a vacuum because this affects all of us, and we should be watching.
Absolutely.
I don't see how this is going to have a peaceful resolution. I know we would like it to have one, but anyway, I don't know everything, and I will admit to that, but I just don't see it if Israel is going to go into Gaza and just, at least without trying to get the individual, the citizens who live there now out, mm-hmm. and you can't separate because Hamas blends in.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like picking a needle out of a haystack. So, if I'm projecting, there are tanks that are already starting to occupy certain areas. There's a total blockade that's been ordered. They're going to go in. They're going to go in. They're going to go in with tanks. They're going to go with soldiers, and for the most part, unfortunately, the innocent, the young, the children, they're the ones that's going to bear the brunt of this, because it's about 2.7 million people that are in that small area. That's a lot of people. So when you look at that, the problem that you're going to have is how will the world react to seeing that actually take place, as opposed to working through diplomatic means of getting those hostages back.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, because where are we from the diplomatic side?
Yeah.
And what conversations are happening from that perspective?
Well, according to Benjamin Netanyahu, there's no
diplomacy. There is no diplomacy, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's not talking to anybody.
They want to decimate that area just to strike the fear of God in them, that they will never try that again.
Well, I know that President Biden also has been talking about trying to convince Israel to stick to the rules of war, if you will, which means you don't separate and you don't take away the food and electricity and all, from or harm the civilians.
Which has been done.
Yeah.
He's already done that.
But on my way over here on MSNBC, I was listening to, and they said that the Israeli soldiers was over in Gaza passing out flyers to some of the Palestinians that are over there, because there's no power over there, and telling them to get out. They're going to have to leave because, it's getting ready to happen.
But the question is, where are they going to go? Egypt said, no, we're not opening our borders. What other options do they have?
Well, they said, they said They said some area for them to go to or whatever, but they were actually passing out. I heard they were actually there passing out flyers,
trying to get people
out of there. And then you got your Secretary Blinken was over in Carter, trying to help to get in Carter to help them get the hostages out as well. So it's a lot. It's a lot of moving pieces going on right now.
Yeah, right. And what does Hamas want?
Yeah, I mean, because Hamas says that its whole point is total destruction of Israel, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Off the face of the map.
Absolutely. And if you look at the morning shows, Sunday shows, Secretary Blinken was on one, and they asked, do you think there's going to be a long war? And he had that pause and that look in his eyes saying, yeah, I think it is. Wow. And he's right. But again, this is one. It's very complex because keep in mind this area has been fought over for hundreds of years, right? So it's not like something that can be solved overnight. We're not going to solve that. The key is, what type of concessions can be given in the future after this conflict is over, to say, hey, we're not going to engage in this anymore because this type of warfare, the world is just past it. I mean, that's what the Prime Minister of India told Vladimir Putin. It's like, what are you doing? We don't do this anymore. This is not the type of conflict that we engage in when he invaded Ukraine, which he's still bombarding Ukraine. And again, I want to talk about Russia for a quick second because what's happening there is the instability that we will see happen if there's not a peaceful transfer, as peaceful as Russia could get, of power. You're going to see a more major uprising there as well. Now, they're good at keeping things in check through an iron fence, but that person is not going to be at the helm very long. So who is that next person? Will it be someone that's an ally to us, or will it be an ally to China? I think it'll be more so an ally to China. And again, we're really not taking into account. China's very quiet. They've been very quiet. We still have North Korea, which is threatening U.S. territories, of course, South Korea. But, still, we're not really taking into account what they're going to be able to do moving forward. So we really have to make sure that we keep that in our purview. And you're asking earlier, why should African Americans and everyday people be concerned about this? It was mentioned earlier, it's in our backyard. But when these wars do take place, we know that it's our sons and daughters, working class people, poor people, disproportionately people of color that are going to be on those front lines, that are going to be there, fighting for these causes. So that's the reason why we should pay attention. It's a humanitarian crisis now. A war anywhere is terrible, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we stay locked in and say, hey, we need to resolve this as peacefully as possible because it's going to get nasty.
757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. Another voice that we always hear on Another View, Carol Pretlow. Hey, Carol, how are you?
Hey, everybody. I miss you guys.
What's your comment, Carol?
Well, it's short and brief, and you all have done a great job of covering all of it. But one thing that has struck me as I've read the New York Times and the Post and all the news cycles and all, is they forget the nature of terrorism. From day one, remember, expect the unexpected. And just as we think we have mastered what Hezbollah, Hamas is going to do, they're looking at the next round of things. One thing that occurred to me the other day was it was a comment about Hezbollah and how they would dress up in military gear from people who had been shot or killed. And so when they dress up in that gear, then we, looking at them, would figure, oh, that's U.S. troops, so that's Great Britain's troops or someone else, and they use strategies that are out of the box. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't adhere to rules of the military and conform with our practices, but I'm saying we should think creatively because that's the nature of terrorism.
Okay, Carol, thanks so much for calling in. We appreciate that.
They were
Eric, you want to
creative,
respond?
weren't they?
Yeah, that was very creative.
The way they came in, the way they went through the gates, the
Absolutely.
way they planned it.
Parachutes.
It was, it was.
My goodness.
But it's so
a totally
interesting
different
because
form of warfare.
one of the things that Israel, I mean, at least everything I had ever heard was that their intelligence units and their soldiers were like, top grade, everything. They were the people to emulate.
Yeah.
And they got caught flat-footed.
Absolutely. Israel has a sophisticated defense technology system to deter missiles that comes in, but it doesn't deter people from parachuting, doesn't deter individuals from sneaking across the borders and stuff like that. So that's where they hit them at their weakness. And again, the instability of the government and the society of Israel at the time really also, I believe, contributed to what we see. So again, this is a lesson for us as well, as our country, especially with the turmoil we have in Washington, precipitated by the Republican Party in the House of Congress, where they should be acting now, but they have the Senate acting as the House of Congress would act and as the Senate would act. So this is something that the Republican Party has done to themselves 3 times now since John Boehner with the Tea Party. Speaker Ryan, he also stepped down because of that same faction, and now Speaker McCarthy stepped down, was removed actually because of that same faction that's causing ruckus, that is causing instability in our government as well. So we have to pay attention to that.
Yeah, I want to come back to that in just a minute. But if you're just joining us, we're talking about current events with the Another View Roundtable. Norfolk City Treasurer Don Hester, political advisor and president of the Hampton NAACP, Galen Knoyton, and political and legal analyst Dr. Eric Claville. Let's talk to Greg in Virginia Beach. Hi, Greg. You're on the air.
Great conversation.
Thank you.
What I get frustrated by is that it seems the general commentary is that Israel is basically an innocent country, and they did nothing wrong, and Palestine just came and started picking on them, and that's so far from the truth. I would challenge any American to think that if the UN ever said that the indigenous people, original Native Americans, can have North America back, and all you Americans, you go fit in Mississippi and Alabama, we would lose our mind. We would do things that will be horrific to people to defend our land. I have zero problem with Palestine defending themselves. I think there should be a 2-state nation. Netanyahu, I don't believe he believes that. So he just wants, in my opinion, I could be wrong, he just wants all of Israel. But they just got there, 70 years ago as a nation? It doesn't make sense to me why we just keep talking about Israel like they're innocent. Now, I do understand it is a strategic location for the Middle East. I understand that. Intellectually, that makes sense. But we have to be more even-handed. Why is it strategic? Well, young lady said it earlier, oil. But we're also concerned about threat. Well, let's attempt to make our enemies our friends. We did that with Egypt. So there's nothing to say we can't continue to do that, but without being hostile and sticking up for the bully all the time. And that's just my opinion.
Thanks, Greg, for the call. Go ahead,
I have
Galen.
a question for Eric. Eric, the conversation and what this gentleman just said, it seems to be, maybe you can clarify it. When you talk about the Palestinians protecting themselves, from what I understand, Hamas is the radical group, and not all the Palestinians agree with what the Hamas has done. So what everybody's doing is putting Palestine all in one bucket with Hamas, and that's not my understanding.
Yeah. So to answer your question, that's correct. Hamas is a terrorist group or a militant group that's been designated as a terrorist group out of part of Palestine, but they are not. They're Palestinian, but they're not. They don't represent Palestine itself. It's very similar, I think, to any terrorist organization.
So did the Palestinians elect Hamas to run it, or they just took over? That's what I think. That's what I think people need to understand.
Yeah, and then also I think what the caller was speaking to as well is, as I alluded to earlier, this area has been fought over for thousands of years, right? It was under Palestine was under the Ottoman Empire in the 1920s. It was occupied by the United Kingdom in the 1940s. 1922, 1940s, and then of course they opted to create a solution, creating a state. I think 1948 is when the state of Israel was formed. 47, UN adopted it at the time the predecessor, the League of Nations, in 48. But again, this is a country that's been land that has been overtaken. The original people pushed out due to war, regathering, and so forth. So it has a very, very, very complicated history. And then some people, even on the religious side, look at this as being part of prophecy, end time prophecy, and things of that nature, which again plays a part in the belief of supporting Israel, especially from a Christian standpoint of view. But at the end of the day, it's still nuts and bolts conflict where people are getting shot and killed.
Mm-hmm. We did get a call from a gentleman named Raphael who said that Hamas does not represent Islam any more than the KKK represents Christianity.
Yeah.
So just to give people a sense of kind of what's going on with that.
And then for people that understand the difference, Hezbollah and Hamas, Shiite and Sunni, we're not going to go into this show because it's another show within itself. But again, those are two separate factions or facets of Islam and so forth. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you guys mentioned a little bit earlier, our Congress is currently not working. Last week, Kevin McCarthy was ousted as Speaker of the House. Yeah. Yesterday, Congressman Scalise was selected in a closed-door voting amongst Republicans, but apparently does not have the 217 votes that he needs to be approved by the entire House. So we've got another shutdown scheduled if the laws aren't changed by next month
during the holiday season.
During the holiday season, we've got the war going on in the Middle East. We still have Ukraine happening. We still have the division within our own country. How frustrated are you, Gayleen, that our Congress is not working right now?
Just goes back to 2016. People not coming out to vote. That's how frustrated I am about it. If you look at how everything got dismantled, after we had this last president in there, everything's got dismantled to where we are. And to even think that he could be the Republican nominee. And this leads to the division that we have in Congress right now. And you said it earlier, it's a small group of folks, or Eric probably said that, a small group that's running everything, basically. I had people call me up saying, well, it was the Democrats and the Republicans that's responsible for McCarthy. Well, the Democrats got tired because McCarthy would tell them one thing and then he'd pull back or whatever. So they said he came and cut a deal on opening the government, not shutting down the government. But they said, we're not going to bail you out on this one. Yeah. We're not going to bail you out on this one. So it's going to be really interesting to watch who's going to be the speaker, because Scalise, he's an election denier. I mean, he didn't believe that the election was right. So you're gonna have an election denier to be your next speaker, and then you got the other guy, Jordan, who was endorsed by Trump. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. It's terrible. So I'm very frustrated with the way it's, but I'm interested to see the outcome of how this is going to pan out.
Dawn, are you frustrated too?
I'm disappointed because people run for office, so they say, to represent the people in their district and either their city, state, or the country. And all of them have taken an oath. And those who are not living up to the oath that they have taken, in my opinion, should be removed from office. But there is no way to do that.
Mm-hmm. Outside of voting.
2/3.
And that's it. To vote.
Yeah.
Y'all, we got to vote. I don't care if you don't like whoever it is that's in your district. You vote for the person that you know is going to at least try to make a difference for you and your family. We have to do that everywhere. We can't miss any election. You just have to vote, because the people who are there, their people like them there. Mm-hmm. And that goes back to my earlier conversation. MAGA terrorists. they are a terrorist group. Let's just call it what it is. You might not want to call it that.
It never ceases to amaze me how such a small group that's supposed to be the minority, within the body, has so much control.
But it just shows you how loud and powerful they are, because their power comes from the voters who support them. So I'm going to go back to Hamas, a little group of people. Palestinians, a lot of people. But that little group of people has inflicted upon the Palestinians and, of course, Israel, pain. Mm-hmm. These MAGA groups, or whatever you choose to call them, I'm just using the word of the day, they are inflicting pain on our country. And if we don't rise up and do what we're supposed to do, which is simple as going out to vote, for at least the people that aren't trying to tear down the country, then we can maybe get back to some semblance of order. But right now, we're in such disarray that we can't even help our neighbors across the country who want help because we don't have a Congress prepared to act.
Mm-hmm. And we can't help Israel outside of what the president can do, can we, Eric?
Right. And right. So you do have that part, which I stated earlier. You have the Senate acting for the House, and instead of until there was some normalization of it. But back to what both Galen and Don were saying about voting. Keep in mind, in Virginia, we have a very important election coming up November 7th. That's where we're able to elect all 140 seats in the state General Assembly, 40 in the Senate, and 100 in, of course, the House of Delegates. That's an entirely new slate of individuals that we can send to represent our interests and pass laws and public policy, what I call good sense and good public policy. With that being the case, you can still register to vote up until October 16th. And, of course, you have mail-in ballots, of course, which you can also request, and also vote. You can vote early now. Early voting has started. And you can also vote the last 2 Saturdays coming up, and also Sunday before the election, before the date of the election. I want to make sure people understand that, because voter apathy is real, because you get situations that we have now.
And it's really a big time now, though, also because it's not a presidential election. And so that usually means that the turnout is even lower.
The districts are new.
But the most important part, even after October 16th, we used to be the 49th hardest state to vote in. We're the 11th easiest state to vote in. That's why our votes are under attack. But after October 16th, if you didn't register to vote, you still can register and vote by provisional ballot, even early vote, even on election day.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's important.
Yeah. And to that point, when we take a look at Congress and what's happening there, you mentioned the small majority of what's happening. Usually it's a squeaky wheel that gets the oil, right? It's the one that's making the most noise. So that's the one you pay attention to the most. But I mentioned earlier, this small faction, which started as the Tea Party, I think they're a Freedom Caucus now, but that particular group, which was born out of resentment, I've said this before, resentment of upward mobility and success, primarily of former President Barack Obama, and seeing the uprising and the under-rumblings of the old adage and the lies that white people are going to lose their place in this country because of the success of people of color, right? And that's simply not the case. I mean, people of color have worked side by side with white Americans to make this country great, both by force and also by will, by free will, and continue to do so. But you see that in these manifestos that are written by these terrorists that are killing people domestically, that we've seen in South Carolina, Mother Emanuel Church, in Minnesota, and in Jacksonville, and the like. So those are all just lies that people galvanize around to put these people in office. But Boehner, he made the compromise with the Tea Party to get the majority in the Republican Party. He quit because they ran him out. Speaker Ryan, he couldn't take it. He quit. McCarthy made a compromise with Matt Gaetz and those others, and he ended up moving. They ended up moving him. I think he resigned before, but ended up voting him out as well. Steve, Majority Whip Scalise. I remember him when he was in the House of Representatives in Louisiana when I worked there, and then also he moved to the Senate before that, before coming into Congress. So you're getting somebody who is going to knows politics, knows how to play the game, but also is part of that particular group.
Yes,
that will galvanize and still push these lies that will continue to divide our nation. But that's what you have. That's in power. That's the small margin, and that's why your vote matters.
And we keep talking about how we've got to rise up and we've got to say something, but I don't see that energy. Do you guys see that energy of people really wanting to rise up and make a change?
I think people don't understand why their vote will make that change, because those individuals will still be there when you look at the federal level. And that's why we're trying to show and share now that your vote does matter, because we're getting a whole new group of legislators and senators in different districts that they haven't represented before, because we worked so hard to get lines redrawn so that the gerrymandering will go away. But you got to keep fighting that.
I want you, Gayleen, in particular, to respond to the whole idea of how to pay attention to all these political ads. Because well, the thing is, because if that's what you use to make a judgment in terms of who to vote for.
So I was at an event the other day, and there's a group that I won't say the name, but anyway, they are and they're African American group, and they support people who come talk to them. And they asked the question why Democrats don't come and talk to them anymore. And we said, it was some other elected officials there, they said, because when we came to talk to you early on when you first started, you went and endorsed the extremists, our opponents. So why come talk to you? So they only support people that come talk to them, but don't look at the issues. And that's what we're telling them. You have got to look at the platforms. You got to look at the issues. And if they are an incumbent, look at their votes. Yeah. We have a voter guide, a nonpartisan voter guide that the NAACP is putting out. Black Vote Matters have it. They're co-branding it, and it has all the issues, the Democrats' votes and the Republican votes. It breaks it down by issues: abortion, criminal justice, everything. And we're going to be putting that out, that information out, so people know to make that decision. It doesn't tell you who to vote for, because we're not partisan, but it would tell you the issues, and you know how this would affect you.
Because there are even ads out there of people, if you listen to the words, and that's the problem. People don't really listen very closely. So that they're positioning people as making votes and having positions who aren't even in office, who have never been in office, who've never been elected. And it's like, you get so frustrated, because it's like, I know that people are passing by, you're half listening or whatever, and so all these different perceptions are being put together, but they may or may not be true. And the negativity, darn, since you've run for office and been in the middle of
God, it is really it is so much worse than it has ever been, and it continues to get worse. And this is what you see, the public facing, when you're looking at the ads that we see on television, or even what's being mailed to our homes. But it's even worse stuff that you don't see. And so I tell people, because usually the people in your circle are the people that you trust and know. You can ask them, and if you want a different view, then you find somebody outside of your circle, because you don't necessarily want to make your decisions based upon everybody else's gumption, but then still as an individual, as you're a working mother, working father, you don't have time to pay attention and look at these things and go through and pick out who's done what. You know what's important to you. You want some money in your pocket. You want to be able to go to work. You want your children to get a good education, and you want to live in a safe place, in a decent home. Who's going to do that for you?
Right. So people really do need to do their homework before they go into the voting booth.
Or find somebody that you trust.
Find somebody
And like
that
I
you
tell
trust.
you, 757-619-7736, you can call me. I'll tell you what I do.
That's right.
I mean, because I have done it. I have studied. We have studied.
Yeah.
Ask us.
That's right. We support the policy.
So, but seriously, and I know, other than calling you, Dawn, I know they can do that. But where else? So the NAACP is putting out a nonpartisan voter guide. Where else should you go? What else should you do?
Well, what I'm gonna say is, don't listen to stuff online, because you don't know what's true and what's not. So that's just as bad. So your social media too is not necessarily the answer. So we can't tell you to go there. Go to a specific location. NAACP. They're going to lay it out. So go to an organization, a nonpartisan organization that's going to lay out the facts, because they have to by law. And then you'll be able to see.
And to make a decision. Eric?
Yeah, there are several races that are highly contested here in Hampton Roads. And I've talked about this before in other settings, where Hampton Roads really will be the center of political power for the next half decade. Reason being is because if you think about it now, all of our executive heads of offices that we elect statewide, governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, all have roots and hail from Virginia Beach, live there. We currently will have, the way that I see this election turning, it's going to be a less than 5 margin of what I think will happen. For the Democrats will take control of the House again. Less than
So you
5.
think the Democrats will?
I do.
Okay.
So, but with that, you'll have the first African American and first black male Speaker of the House, Dunn Scott, and of course you'll have the head of the Senate, still Senator Louise Lucas, President pro tem. So she'll be the most senior member of the Senate as well. With that, you'll also have 2 African Americans who head the finance committees, what we call the money committees, both with Delegate Luke Torian and also with Senator Louise Lucas as well on the Senate side. So if you think about that, Hampton Roads itself will basically have a large number of, and also you have 3 African American senators in this area with Aaron Rouse out of Virginia Beach, Angela Williams-Graves out of Norfolk, and then of course Louise Lucas out of Portsmouth.
Yes,
Supposing that they want, that they actually
Senator Mamie Locke, Senator Mamie Locke, who would probably be we're supporting her to be the Senate Majority Leader.
Right, definitely out of Hampton. But again, just kind of looking at Southampton Roads, where you'll have that. I mean, that's huge. We've never had that in the history of this Commonwealth. So when you take a look at what's happening and what policy can shift, and possibly a flipping of the executive house, if not all 3 offices in 2025, that is huge. So Hampton Roads is really pushing that. Now, where can you find that straightforward, unbiased information? You have our publications, both news publications on the peninsula and also here on the south side, where they have these candidate profiles, and you can read that. Also, you can listen on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. to the State of the Water and the Cleveland Report at 91.1. So it'll be it. Where I actually I bring the candidates on air to talk about their platforms. So
and Washington Post,
really,
the Washington Post is good.
The Washington Post is good
Post
too. But then the other thing too is, I don't want people to be afraid of what Eric just shared. Because when you do have individuals who have the ability, the intelligence, the experience to lead at the state level, that's impactful for Hampton Roads overall. And that's why it's important for them to go out and vote for the individuals that were just mentioned, because it will make a difference in your lives and the lives of your children.
Now, there's been, and we only got 4 minutes left, but there's been a lot of controversy about people's names being dropped from the rolls, particularly those who may have had their rights restored if they were felons, and suddenly those names are gone. There's lawsuits going on and so forth. Should people, Gayleen, go and make sure they're on the roll?
Everyone can go to vote.org and check their information to make sure it's correct. I have spoken to several folks who have voted every year, and they went online and looked at their information and the street was wrong or they weren't there at all. Everyone needs to take this. There's a group that's called
Vote.org.
Vote.org.
Okay.
VOTE.org. There's a group called the Virginia Fair Elections that created the Virginia model to undermine and usurp this election. They are training people to work inside the polls, and their underlining stance is mistrust in the election system. So we're asking people to become poll observers. We're asking people to go be election officers, which is a paid position, to work inside these polls, because votes are going to be challenged. And we need to watch it. And people need to report. If they see any information, they need to report it. And Vote.org has the election protection. And we'll have all kinds of different sites on NACP.org. We'll have a boiler room in Virginia. You know, for it. We've got a lot of organizations in Virginia that is going to be watching to ensure there's a fair election in Virginia.
Okay. Last 2 minutes. Eric, is Governor Glenn Youngkin going to be on the 2024 ballot for president?
I say no. Right now, this is the party of Trump. He is a foregone nominee. You know, I said that months ago. And you're looking at the implosion of what is the Republican Party, and they're going to have to find out who their new voice is moving forward. But no, there's no way he'll run. If he does put his hat in, it'll be a failed, I think, attempt because of what's taking place now. Unfortunately, you know, amongst that group. So,
And you all know that President Trump has also said that former President Obama is still running the White House. That was the latest thing that just came out.
That goes back to the fear, and that's why I told people, don't be afraid.
Yeah, stoking fear.
Because black people can lead. You've seen us. We're sitting here, right here. You're listening to some of us, and there are many throughout this state, country, world. I just want to mention as we close, the USS Cole anniversary is today.
Yes.
And of course, I lost a friend, and so I just want to remind us of that. In this state of terror that we're in, just be vigilant and love one another and be kind.
Thank you, Dawn. And we're sorry for your loss. That's, for all of those families. And as Eric stated earlier in the show, too, we do send out our prayers and thoughts for both sides of this conflict, because the people are the ones who are being
It's the
really
innocent
hurt.
folks.
And it's the innocent people who, Gayleen, we got 30 seconds. You want to tell us about the dinner?
Oh, yeah. So we're having our 51st annual Life Membership Dinner at Hampton NACP, and Barbara Hamley is our MC, and it'll be October 29th at the Hampton Roads Convention Center at 3 p.m. And we have Bishop Rudolph McKissick out of Florida, who's going to be the speaker. We have the Hampton University, part of the Hampton University Choir under the direction of Omar Dickinson there as well. And Sunday Vote is in Hampton, and Newport News is October 22nd.
All right. With that, thank you, Roundtable, as always. And thank you, audience, for spending the past hour with us. And we hope you've gained some perspective on world events that affect us all. Now, you can listen to the show again by downloading our podcast at anotherviewradio.org. You can also sign up for our eView newsletter. It's a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. Next week on Another View, how eminent domain allowed local universities to destroy black neighborhoods. It's a critical conversation that you do not want to miss. Our theme music is an original composition created especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer, and our very, very dear friend Victor Bowen, he's back as our audio engineer, filling in for Jordan Christie. Dr. Barry Graham answered our phones, and yes, we use his full title because we love him. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Stay safe, everyone, and let's get together again next Thursday at noon for Another View.